welcome back once again. Thank you so much for clicking on this video. If this is your first time, my name is Mambi and you are very welcome. Here I share news about the AES and Africa. Yes, of course, this is not the rare people speaking English, is translated. So yes, if you are happy with that and you want to know what is going on in the AES, the actual news, then stay with me because this is the longest one I share so far. It's about the president of Niger, General Abdourahmane Tiani. He took us back to history. He took us back to present. He took us back across Africa and the world to explain to us what is going on and what is going on right now concerning security and everything. It is a lot. It is a lot. So families, I will leave you here to listen to it all. Disclaimer, this video is only for educational purpose only. It's for us Africans, English-speaking Africans, to learn what is going on in our other French-speaking countries. And that's the reason why I'm sharing this video, for our educational purpose only. I'm not against any country or anything, no. I'll be back, families. Thank you for your time.
Ladies and gentlemen, good evening. Tonight, Telesal's Grand Interview welcomes Army General Abdourahman Tiani, President of the Republic and Head of State. In this interview with the President of the Republic, as is customary, we will address the security issue that has been of great concern to the population over the past few weeks. And a few current affairs questions. Mr. President, good evening, and thank you once again for granting us a bit of your time to talk about the insecurity that prevails in certain areas of the country. It is no secret to anyone that for several years now, our Sahelian region has been facing numerous security problems, mainly related to terrorism. The challenges are significant, but it must be acknowledged that progress has been made, even though much remains to be done. In truth, the difficulty of the task is also explained by its complexity. The security issue is further complicated by the fact that certain foreign powers external to our region continue to play a destabilizing role in hopes of regaining privileges they have now lost. Question, Mr. President, generally speaking, what is the current state of the security situation in Niger and even in our region, in our AES Confederation? Is the situation under control despite the difficulties? What are the overall prospects? Auzu billahi minekitani razim, bismillahi rahman irrahim.
Thank you, Abdoulaye. It is a pleasure to share with all of our beloved compatriots of the Confederation and around the world who are following us regarding this security issue in our region. As you mentioned, it is an issue tied to geopolitical and geostrategic interests. But allow me, first of all, to pay tribute to all the peoples of the Confederation and especially to the brave people of Niger, to offer them my deepest and most heartfelt condolences for the civilian and military casualties, and also to pay tribute to all of our defense and security forces who, at the cost of enormous sacrifices, are fighting day and night to keep our confederal space, our country, and especially Niger, standing. To answer your question, we need to recall some history because, as the Quran says, reminders are beneficial. it is important to recall so that Nigerians and other peoples can understand the definition of this particular threat that we are currently facing, the implications behind this threat, which are none other than the defense of the geostrategic or geopolitical interests of the powers, imperialists, but especially neo-colonialists. We must always place events in their context of globalization. I mean, placing the elements or events in their context of globalization by recalling in 1979, many have forgotten, many others never knew about it. A hostage taking in Saudi Arabia in the Grand Mosque of Mecca, hostage taking of the president of pilgrims, associated with or attributed to what was called the fundamentalists, that is young students, who were in perhaps working on their doctoral thesis or something similar in the field of Islam. In response to this hostage situation, several countries will mobilize, and among these countries, of course, France will be the first to ask Saudi Arabia to allow them to make available to the state and the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia what is known or still known as the GIGN, the intervention group of the French National Gendarmerie. But the Saudis knew that it was the Assonists who wanted to play the role of firefighter. They politely but diplomatically rejected this offer. They replaced this offer with the intervention of Pakistan's highly trained and elite special forces units, because they were absolutely convinced that the Pakistani special forces, who were predominantly composed of Muslims, could in fact enter the mosque where several hundred innocent civilian pilgrims were being held hostage. This happened in November 1979. The crisis would reach its resolution a month later, in December 1979. But this was only the beginning of a major plot that I cannot fully recount here. All in all, in 1980, the conflict would shift as the neo-colonial and imperialist powers moved it to Afghanistan. You know what happened in Afghanistan from 1980 until exactly 1986. You are aware of the implications that took place in Afghanistan. After Afghanistan, this conflict would move a bit further to Iraq. We know what happened in Iraq. We know the actors, we know the implications, and we know the geostrategic and geopolitical interests, as well as all the unspoken truths that unfortunately marked this period during which many Iraqi citizens lost their lives. Neo-colonialism would not stop there. One hotspot is followed by another, already set to ignite the conflict will return to Syria. But before reaching Syria, they tried to ignite it closer to us in Algeria. With the return of the Mujahideen coming back from Afghanistan, so Syria became another focal point for this geostrategic and geopolitical interests of neocolonial imperialist powers. You have followed what happened in Syria up to the latest developments, where everyone witnessed and everyone discovered the grand scheme of these neo-colonialist powers. But before the end of the Syrian conflict, they also set up another hotspot on standby, which they reignited Libya right on our border. They tried to ignite it closer to us in Algeria, with the echoes of words coming back from Afghanistan. So Syria became another focal point for these geostrategic and geopolitical interests of the neo-colonial imperialist powers. You followed what happened in Syria up to the latest developments, where everyone was watching and everyone discovered the grand scheme of these neo-colonialist powers. But before things ended in Syria, they also set up another hotspot on standby, which they reignited, that was Libya, right on our border. We know what happened in Libya, and we know who the actors were behind what happened in Libya, as well as the consequences of that intervention, in the face of which, unfortunately, our African countries did not have the courage to raise their voices. I am bringing this up to remind people that if today I am able to address my fellow citizens directly, it is thanks to a great deal of effort that has been made. Our defense and security forces have made many sacrifices to address the specific case of the Sahel in general, the Confederation more precisely, and Niger in particular. I will remind you once again who the main actors and stakeholders are behind the situation that we are all experiencing today. These actors are none other than France, accompanied unfortunately by the European Union, and the outgoing administration of the United States of America. France has, in the past, used various different means to destabilize us. You may recall July 26, the date of the ongoing revolution in Niger. 2 days after July 26, 2023, Emmanuel Macron, who was visiting an overseas territory or department, convened a defense council. I repeat, a defense council on the situation in Niger. It was indeed, I say it and I repeat it, on July 28, 2023. So 48 hours after the events of July 26. At this council, decisions were made, and among them was that Bazoum must be restored to power by any means necessary. To restore Bazoum to power, there were proposals notably the use of ECOWAS as a puppet. But of course, they are not the ones calling it a puppet. And they present ECOWAS as a defender of democracy, rights, and constitutional order. The French regime did not stop at using and manipulating ECOWAS. They created, and I mentioned this during my last interview on December 25, 2024, they created a first cell. They simply called it the unit responsible for reflection on command for Africa. This unit, as I mentioned, was entrusted to Jean-Marie Bockel. I said it in the interview on the 25th, who himself called upon senior officers of the French armed forces, notably David Pawlowski and then Paul Menon Berteux. At the time, I also mentioned the position they held. That's it. All in all, their mission assigned to them by Jean-Marie Bockel himself, who was appointed and mandated by Emmanuel Macron, was to think about ways not only to prevent any further contagion, since what happened in Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger is considered a contagious disease that had to be eradicated by all means. These people thought it over, as I also mentioned in the interview on the 25th, which our viewers can refer to.
MH.
And to speed things up, they made some proposals. France, which currently maintains a significant military presence in 5 African countries, namely Chad, Côte d'Ivoire, Gabon, Senegal, and Djibouti, has been involved in discussions regarding the proposal for the establishment of an African command similar in structure and function to AFRICOM in the United States.
United States, yes.
Suggests that this number, where it was announced to the Africans, the French, are withdrawing in the face of 15 countries. I listed the 15 countries. Many started to deny it, but you can't deny a truth. In the end, that is there. It's a historical truth. Now, Emmanuel Macron has confirmed it. I won't go back over these countries because I already listed them, but Africans need to realize that whatever France plans, it will do everything to achieve it, even if it takes 100 years. A French general once told Béchet, we were in Africa 200 years ago. We left 60 years ago. Now that we are back, we must stay for at least 100 years. These are not empty words. These are not empty words when you compare them with what General Lepointre said a few months ago in 2024, that with the European Union, it will be necessary to cross the Mediterranean, whether it's in 1 year, 2 years, or 10 years, to reconquer Africa by force, under false pretenses. Because France and Europe, without Africa, means there is suffering ahead in the future. Another French genius, a prominent thinker and influential figure in history, also once said the following: since the French troops, along with the ambassador, whom we have recently expelled from our country are currently in the process of being evacuated. It is likely that they will attempt to use this period of transition, which is particularly favorable for acts of subversive destabilization, to their advantage. These are not empty words. These are carefully considered words, the result of strategic discussions that these people are having against us. One day in 2024, after this task force for which Jean-Marie Bockel was responsible and whose results he presented on October 23, 2024 to the French presidency, that is, to Emmanuel Macron, he initiated it, and he didn't stop there, to show you the European spirit that surrounds all these events we are experiencing today. He undertook a presentation campaign. He has already done Italy. He was supposed to do Germany in November 2024, and that's when we stopped paying attention to these actions to focus on what was essential. That's it. So after this task force, another task force was created in September, still in 2024. This task force was called the Sahel Task Force of the Elysee. The Sahel Task Force of the Elysee was entrusted to a certain Christophe Guillou, or Guillou. I'm not sure how it's pronounced. Guillou is spelled Guilhou. It's up to the viewers or the French to tell us how it's pronounced. But for me, I consider it to be Christophe Guillou. All right. So this Christophe Guillou, or Guillou, I'm not sure, also, like Jean-Marie Bockel, appointed another genius to lead the reflection. Let me remind you that Christophe Guillou was the French ambassador to Cameroon. And he took on the title of ambassador and French special envoy to the Sahel. He is going to appoint a certain Jérémy Robert. This is the genius who will once again lead the reflection on the most suitable lesson to give to the countries of the Confederation. This Christophe Jérémy will put together his team. He will hold the title of Africa Advisor at the Elysee. I repeat, Africa Advisor at the Elysee, that's Jérémy Robert. He will set up this Sahel unit, which will be made up of the French DGSE and the International Organization of La Francophonie. I repeat, the International Organization of La Francophonie, and a geopolitical department from the French Ministry of Foreign Affairs. This unit, according to their own words and statements, will have essentially unlimited funds at its disposal, available for use as needed. Unlimited funds, I emphasize this because it shows the importance that the subversive French regime places on this Sahel unit. With unlimited funds at its disposal, the organization's mission will be to actively amplify and bring greater attention to any significant event or development that occurs within the entire Confederation of Sahel States region. In particular, any event that takes place even has not taken place in Niger. I mean, even events that have not actually happened in Niger. All right. It will also have the mission through the French DGSE to carry out operations, especially in Niger. This Sahel unit, the missions that have been assigned to this unit, the importance of this reminder is so that our compatriots in Niger, in the Confederation, and even around the world, since we have a confederal diaspora across the globe, understand what is currently happening in our region. This is an information war, a war of destabilization, a war of new colonization that is being waged with French, European, and Western funding, but by powers, I repeat, that are neo-colonial, imperialist, and Western. France and its other accomplices have not limited themselves to creating these units to which they have assigned very specific missions. France has also infiltrated all the movements that were initially called independence movements, then jihadist movements, and finally terrorist movements. Because no matter how fast a lie runs, the truth will always catch up with it in the end. It is these powerful neo-colonialist forces and their auxiliary troops, Tirelos, from another era, from the past, that we are facing successfully indeed. But to fully understand the implications of these actions, it is important to recognize that these European powers, acting under the direction and influence of their spiritual guide, have systematically carried out what we can accurately describe as terrorist repopulation within our confederal space, a process that has deeply affected the social and political fabric of our communities. What exactly did this terrorist repopulation consist of? They, in two successive waves, transferred from Lake Chad. For the first time, faced with the collapse experienced by their auxiliaries, the auxiliary riflemen of another era, they transferred 400 fighters from the Islamic State in West Africa or in the West African provinces, as they pompously call it, into the Burkina, Niger, Mali triangle. This took place from the 21st to the 24th of April last month, 2025. A second group of 350 fighters, again from ISWAP, the Islamic State, as they call it, in the provinces of West Africa. But here as well, I want to show that there is nothing Islamic about it. They are mercenaries in the pay of Western powers. So 350 in, unfortunately, the north of Benin, which is currently abandoned by the Beninese armed forces under the pretext of creating strategic depth. What kind of strategic depth can Benin afford? All of this is just French inspired to leave the way open for all malicious actors to target exclusively the countries of the Confederation. This too will be detailed in the questions that will certainly follow. So, to summarize, I give a historical overview to show that all the countries that have faced this geostrategic, geopolitical war from 1979 to the present day have not come out of it unscathed. To demonstrate all the means and resources used by France, accompanied, as I say and repeat, by the European Union and at a certain point by the United States of America, are truly colossal means and resources that could have allowed, as they themselves said, the terrorists they encountered in the Lake Chad Basin. We want you to intervene because we cannot intervene openly, not in any obvious way. Certain powers will not let us act. That's what they told the ISWAP and Boko Haram terrorists, since both factions are involved. We will provide you with all the means necessary for you to finish off the countries of the Confederation, starting with Niger. State your needs, whether they are financial, material, or in terms of human resources, and your wishes will be granted. That's what they told them in March of this year, 2025, on March 15th, to be exact, at a meeting attended by the French delegation and the American delegation. There was also a delegation representing Great Britain and some countries from the European Union and Africa, particularly West African countries. This goes to show that these neo-colonial imperialist powers have spared no effort or resources to destabilize us. And that if we are resisting, if we are holding on, persevering even, despite the obvious and significant financial and economic difficulties faced by our three states, it is thanks to the undeniable and unwavering efforts, the undeniable effort of the Sahel Alliance states through their dedicated defense and security forces. This ongoing and determined effort is precisely what allows us to control the situation, to contain it, and to gradually reverse the trend, despite everything that has been deployed by these neo-colonial powers. This is to tell the people of the Confederation and the peoples of Africa that they should be proud, despite all the media noise and the announcements of apocalypse currently being made about the territories of the Confederation. I repeat, our peoples should be proud of what we have accomplished. They should be proud of what we have achieved, especially knowing that this is a systematic encirclement operation against the Confederation, which has been planned, I repeat, through the riflemen of our generation or their auxiliaries, and French, European, and Western spies, in short. So This is a situation that we are in control of. It is admittedly a difficult situation. It is a situation with geostrategic and geopolitical ramifications, as well as neo-colonialist interests. Our people should be proud of their defense and security forces. All right?
Mr. President, we also observe that the security situation is more difficult in Western Niger than in the tri-border area, especially when compared to the eastern zone, particularly around Lake Chad or Sevi with Boko Haram. How do you explain this situation?
All these ongoing events are the result of the geostrategic and geopolitical interests of neo-colonial imperialist powers who use auxiliaries whom we have stopped calling jihadists or terrorists, but rather neo-colonialist auxiliaries through whom they wage war against our states. We are currently in a state of war. The countries I mentioned, which were unable to withstand this situation, are clear evidence for any skeptic. We are living in a state of war, neo-colonialist war situation, driven by interest, neo-colonialist. Lake Chad was at one point the focus of interest for these neo-colonial powers. Lake Chad does not date from 2015, as some might think, but rather from before 2015. We know how far back Lake Chad goes. I personally already served in the Lake Chad area back in 1996 and 1997. It's true, those were different movements and they were resolved in different ways because at the time there was no neo-colonialist involvement. Through negotiations, we managed in fact to reach agreements that we celebrate every April 24th in our country, Niger.
The Concord Festival.
The Day of Concord. So, to return to the situation that concerns us today, Lake Chad was at a certain point from 2010, 2011, 2012, 2013, 2014, 2015, up to the beginning of 2025, the center of interest for these neo-colonialist powers. But with the creation of the Alliance of Sahel States, the geostrategic, geopolitical, and neo-colonialist interests have shifted their focus. The new area of these interests is the confederal space. Where is this confederal space located? It is located at the confluence of Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger. I say confluence just to illustrate. This new hub of interest has become a focal point for those external powers that are seeking to expand their influence in the region. And this is the main reason why, ever since the creation of the Alliance of Sahel States, which was subsequently followed by the establishment of the Confederation, we have consistently witnessed a significant intensification of various actions and interventions directed against our states by these foreign actors. with interests having gradually shifted from Lake Chad to the Alliance of Sahel States, and later on to the Confederation of Sahel States, the Western powers, in turn, also transferred their proxies, their neo-colonialist auxiliary fighters, to wage war against us throughout the entirety of our confederal space, because by any means necessary, one of the states had to fall. And that justifies the active involvement of certain American interest groups, in particular alongside France, which of course has never let go of its hostility and its relentless determination to preserve. Maybe it's logical, it is rational on their part to carefully protect their interests in states that are not considered to be sovereign states. And certain quotes will help you understand. Up to now, the lens through which France and certain citizens, the French elite, who lead, I don't know if we should call it the French destiny. In any case, those who are at the head of the French state or the advisors to those who lead the French state simply refer to as French colonies that must not be lost by any means necessary. It means exactly what it says. And it's a lesson for the ECOWAS countries that think they are independent, when in fact they are still considered by many to be French colonies. Even in the 21st century, this ongoing perception serves as a reminder that France is determined not to lose its influence or control over these nations under any circumstances for the prosperity of its sons and grandsons, at the risk of seeing, in their own words, migration would change direction. Because if that were to happen according to these same French masterminds, who were the architects behind these plans and strategies, it would actually be the French themselves who would be the ones to cross over, making the journey to come to these former colonies, the very territories that were once under their control and influence. If, that is, these colonies managed to free themselves, to seek their livelihood. So this is to tell you that what is happening in the Confederate space is in fact the result of deep and careful reflection, a process that has been thoroughly guided by the unwavering defense of the geostrategic and geopolitical interests of these colonial powers. These powers who have historically shown themselves to be willing to go to any lengths are prepared to walk over corpses of the many African citizens of the Confederation throughout the continent, who indeed have never declared war on them. But these Western powers should, without a doubt, pay particularly close attention to this. If their war is truly aimed at preserving, and I repeat, preserving their opulence and their prosperity, with the clear intention of ensuring that these advantages and comforts are maintained, then it is evident that their motivation is to prevent their descendants from experiencing any form of suffering or hardship that could result from losing such wealth and privilege. The war we are fighting so relentlessly is a true matter of life or death for our states and our people. This struggle is unlike any we have faced before, and God willing, the outcome will not be the same. We are fighting for our survival. This is a struggle that goes beyond just ourselves. It is a fight for the very survival of the African man, plain and simple. We are determined to protect our future, our families, and our way of life. I am sure, and I truly believe, that with faith and perseverance, and God willing, victory will be on our side. So that's what makes this struggle so significant, so meaningful, and so important to all of us. Everything happening in this space is just exaggeration that has in some ways been overstated or misrepresented, which relies on amplified events often tragic events, but entirely fabricated by France. And we are proof of this. All right? We have material evidence. We have physical evidence because we have individuals who actively participated in these events. All right. The camp has changed, yes, from Lake Chad towards what we call the Confederate space. It is the geostrategic interests that have changed, and it is a matter of protecting new colonialist interests in order to prevent the AES states from setting an example in Africa. Because that is the greatest concern of these powers. If the AES succeeds, other countries that have not had the courage to take a stand until now will follow in the footsteps of the Confederation. And on that point, the West works together perfectly to make sure it fails. But there was Western greed involved. To draw a small comparison, people need to clearly understand that in general, the West does not show any genuine concern whatsoever truly about the communities that make up our Confederate space. The West tries to make it seem as if it is out of humanitarianism that they are intervening in our region to protect targeted and massacred communities. But let me give you a small example, and everyone can form their own opinion. The conflict currently taking place in Palestine, in Gaza, has now lasted a year and 6 months. Do you know how many deaths have been recorded? In a year and 6 months, there have been more than 50,000 deaths. More than 200,000 injured. 50,000 dead, mostly men, women, and children, and Palestinian children. But where are all these humanitarians? Where are all these powers so quick to intervene or to claim the right of humanitarian intervention? Of course, humanitarian intervention when it concerns the countries of the Confederation, but humanitarian intervention that no longer has any meaning, even with regard to the organization that brings us together today. The 194 countries that make up the United Nations. Let's go. All these organizations, all these countries are silent today. This just goes to show you that people are not campaigning out of humanitarianism. It's purely to defend geostrategic interests in our region. So, to conclude, yes, that's it. To answer your question, these are, in essence, geostrategic power plays that at one point or another, incrementally and progressively shift the perception of destabilization that we have in a region such as Lake Chad initially only, for it to eventually be transferred to the wider confederal space of the Sahel states. It's simply this imperialist game that we are witnessing.
Mr. President, regarding the tri-border area, in January, State and Defense Minister said on TV forming an AES Confederation Army to secure it. What is the status and what is the joint response approach?
But I am actually quite surprised by this question. All right? And that justifies the active involvement of certain American interest groups, in particular alongside France, which of course has never let go of its hostility and its relentless determination to preserve. Maybe it's logical, it is rational on their part to carefully protect their interests in states that are not considered to be sovereign states. And certain quotes will help you understand. Up to now, the lens through which France and certain citizens, the French elite who lead, I don't know if we should call it the French destiny. In any case, those who are at the head of the French state or the advisors to those who lead the French state simply refer to as French colonies that must not be lost by any means necessary. It means exactly what it says. And it's a lesson for the ECOWAS countries that think they are independent, when in fact they are still considered by many to be French colonies. Even in the 21st century, this ongoing perception serves as a reminder that France is determined not to lose its influence or control over these nations under any circumstances for the prosperity of its sons and grandsons, at the risk of seeing, in their own words, migration would change direction. Because if that were to happen according to these same French masterminds, who were the architects behind these plans and strategies, it would actually be the French themselves who would be the ones to cross over, making the journey to come to these former colonies, the very territories that were once under their control and influence. If, that is, these colonies managed to free themselves, to seek their livelihood. So this is to tell you that what is happening in the Confederate space is in fact the result of deep and careful reflection, a process that has been thoroughly guided by the unwavering defense of the geostrategic and geopolitical interests of these colonial powers. These powers who have historically shown themselves to be willing to go to any lengths are prepared to walk over corpses of the many African citizens of the Confederation throughout the continent, who indeed have never declared war on them. But these Western powers should, without a doubt, pay particularly close attention to this. If their war is truly aimed at preserving, and I repeat, preserving their opulence and their prosperity, with the clear intention of ensuring that these advantages and comforts are maintained, then it is evident that their motivation is to prevent their descendants from experiencing any form of suffering or hardship that could result from losing such wealth and privilege. The war we are fighting so relentlessly is a true matter of life or death for our states and our people. This struggle is unlike any we have faced before, and God willing, the outcome will not be the same. We are fighting for our survival. This is a struggle that goes beyond just ourselves. It is a fight for the very survival of the African man, plain and simple. We are determined to protect our future, our families, and our way of life. I am sure, and I truly believe, that with faith and perseverance, and God willing, victory will be on our side. So that's what makes this struggle so significant, so meaningful, and so important to all of us. Everything happening in this space is just exaggeration that has in some ways been overstated or misrepresented, which relies on amplified events, often tragic events, but entirely fabricated by France. And we are proof of this. All right? We have material evidence. We have physical evidence because we have individuals who actively participated in these events. All right? The camp has changed, yes, from Lake Chad towards what we call the Confederate space. It is the geostrategic interests that have changed, and it is a matter of protecting new colonialist interests in order to prevent the AES states from setting an example in Africa. Because that is the greatest concern of these powers. If the AES succeeds, other countries that have not had the courage to take a stand until now will follow in the footsteps of the Confederation. And on that point, the West works together perfectly to make sure it fails. But there was Western greed involved. To draw a small comparison, people need to clearly understand that in general, the West does not show any genuine concern whatsoever truly about the communities that make up our Confederate space. The West tries to make it seem as if it is out of humanitarianism that they are intervening in our region to protect targeted and massacred communities. But let me give you a small example, and everyone can form their own opinion. The conflict currently taking place in Palestine, in Gaza, has now lasted a year and 6 months. Do you know how many deaths have been recorded? In a year and 6 months, there have been more than 50,000 deaths. More than 200,000 injured. 50,000 dead, mostly men, women, and children, and Palestinian children. But where are all these humanitarians? Where are all these powers so quick to intervene or to claim the right of humanitarian intervention? Of course, humanitarian intervention when it concerns the countries of the Confederation, but humanitarian intervention that no longer has any meaning, even with regard to the organization that brings us together today, the 194 countries that make up the United Nations. Let's go. All these organizations, all these countries are silent today. This just goes to show you that people are not campaigning out of humanitarianism. It's purely to defend geostrategic interests in our region. So, to conclude, yes, that's it. To answer your question, these are, in essence, geostrategic power plays that at one point or another, incrementally and progressively shift the perception of destabilization that we have in a region such as Lake Chad initially only, for it to eventually be transferred to the wider confederal space of the Sahel states. It's simply this imperialist game that we are witnessing.
Mr. President, regarding the tri-border area, in January, State and Defense Minister said on TV, forming an AES Confederation Army to secure it. What is the status and what is the joint response approach?
But I am actually quite surprised by this question, all right? Because in addition to being Minister of State and Minister of National Defense as he clearly stated during his review interview, it is in fact a tangible and undeniable physical reality on the ground that at present we are actively forming what we call the unified and coordinated force of the Sahel states. This is not the standby force or the force on standby. I'm not even sure of the exact name, because this force has existed for more than 30 years. And for over 30 years, it has always been on standby or always waiting, to the point that it has become obsolete. It has never carried out a single operation, even though the region has been troubled since 2010 by neo-colonialist geostrategic interests. We experienced this in Nigeria. ECOWAS, through its standby force, has never done anything to help or support Nigeria. These are the very same countries that Nigeria today considers, or that the Nigerian authorities consider as their enemies, who sacrificed men and women to reclaim the entire Borno region. And I want to emphasize, to reclaim the entire Borno region. And this did not start in 2010. Personally, I led operations, as I mentioned, in 96, 97, and then in 2008, before the current situation arose. Then, Nigerian officers, notably the Minister of State and Minister of the Interior, led troops in coordination with the Chadian armed forces to liberate vast occupied territories in Nigeria, particularly all the states that made up or still make up Borno. This is the sacrifice our forces made. And it is this very sacrifice that the Nigerian authorities are now spitting on. So, to return to the unified force, it is a reality. This force has proven itself on the ground, unlike the ECOWAS standby force, as was brilliantly stated by Chogol Maiga, the former Malian Prime Minister. This standby force that we are still waiting for, but which has remained on standby for more than 30 years. The unified force of the Confederation is an active force. It has carried out bilateral operations between, for example, Niger and Burkina Faso, Niger and Mali, or Mali and Burkina Faso. It has also conducted operations in a tripartite manner, meaning operations within the Confederation as a force of the Confederation. At least 3 operations, the most recent of which took place in January and concluded in February of this year, 2025. You follow the news, you follow the reports from the defense and security forces. I believe that the people of Niger, Mali, and Burkina Faso know
that the unified force of the Sahel Alliance states is a reality. It is a force that is gradually being put in place. It is a force that is gaining strength. It is a force that we decided to create back on July 31, 2023, when ECOWAS, acting as a puppet in the hands of France, had decided to wage war on Nigeria country, to which it had given a one-week ultimatum to restore the democratically elected, the so-called democratic leader of Africa, Bazoum Mohamed. This force was born on July 31, 2023, when Mali and Burkina Faso declared that any attack against Niger would be considered an act of aggression against either of these states. And that together we will confront ECOWAS. A week later, ECOWAS, France put the warning into action, as you saw, with all the ensuing events.
Of course.
The mobilizations that took place, the ironclad embargo imposed on our country, I won't go back over that. We continue to suffer the consequences of this embargo, which has not been lifted as of today, because it is France's will not to lift it. So the unified strength of the Confederation is a reality. It is active, it is gaining momentum, because we have understood that our fate will depend on it. Isolation. That is what France and all its Western allies are relentlessly pursuing. Isolation. Alone, we are weak, but together, within the Confederation, we are strong. We are very strong. I'm convinced of it. And the proof is clearly evident in the way in which we are currently handling this ongoing neo-colonialist war that has been imposed upon us simply for reasons of prestige, and furthermore to preserve the sources of prosperity for these powerful neo-colonial powers. All right. Mr. President, in your previous interviews, you mentioned security issues related to attempts at destabilization along our borders with Benin and Nigeria. Where do we stand at the moment? More generally, what is the situation regarding the attempts, plans, and other plots to destabilize our country and its institutions, orchestrated by certain foreign powers with the complicity of some Africans? You just ended by mentioning, unfortunately, the complicity of some Africans, but it should be specified that it is certain heads of state and their associates of African countries, particularly West African countries. As you mentioned, Nigeria and Benin recalled the sacrifices we have made. And when I say sacrifice, that is not a word I use lightly. sacrifices made by our soldiers, sacrifices by our civilian population, sacrifices of our financial resources, sacrifices of our material resources to stand by Nigeria when it was necessary to stand by Nigeria, when we understood that Nigeria's security is our security, and vice versa. Unfortunately, as I have said in my previous interviews,
Thank you so much, families, for listening and watching. It is deep. Everything about this interview is very, very deep. And I know some of you will be wondering, if they know all this, why are they still working with America? Because we see the Prime Minister going there, coming, having meetings and all that. There's more to this interview, like I said, 3.5 hours. I will bring the rest. I hope we will learn a lot more from the other hours as well. I will leave you here from Afghanistan to Syria and the other neighboring countries. For me, the Syria one is something I know more about. The rest, just a bit. And to know and think that they will never, ever leave Africa alone. It's serious and it's sad. I won't waste your time, families. Add what you have learned under the comment section. Let's learn something from you. I know many of you has warned me several times to share some things that I haven't, because it's not my place to do that. So I'm happy that our president has come out to share all these informations with us. Amount of terrorists that they brought into the area to destabilize these 3 countries, saying that if they have taken one, then all of them will fall apart. It's good that he's out to talk about it, so they know that they know what is going on. Credit to Faso 7 RTN for sharing this information with us, this interview with us. May God bless our leaders. General Abdourahmane, Your Highness, thank you so much for your time to explain things that is going on to us. We appreciate you, and may God protect you all. My VIPs, my kings and queens, thank you so, so much. My returning families, those who are passing by, thank you so, so much. Please like this video, share it. Let other people know what is going on in the Sahel. And I'll pray with you to watch it on telly, so you will not disturb your phone or tablet. It's better to watch it on telly. Thank you so much. God bless you all. Have a wonderful day. Whatever you have learned, let us know under the comment section. See you soon. Bye-bye. I'll bring part 2 later.